somehow we're nearly halfway through 2024 already, so it's time to round up every game I've played this year so far in the only way I know how, a good old tier list. Now this year has been a bit of a weird one so far for the Nintendo Switch. Despite the fact that we know the Switch 2, or the Switch successor as they've called it, is going to come no time soon, the releases for the Switch itself have just been not that great in general. Like, for example, some of the games I was the most excited for and some of the big AAA game Nintendo Switch releases have not really hit the mark for me. But then you have some indie games that have kind of come out of nowhere and just blown me away. And today we're going to cover everything from the good, the bad, and a lot of the mid. And like all my other videos, the tiering system is pretty simple. S tier games are basically some of the best games you can get on the Nintendo Switch, full stop. They're fantastic, they're good value for money, and they're games that I would recommend to absolutely anyone. And then you have the D tier games, which are games I will categorically say do not buy on the Nintendo Switch. Although as you'll see, these are not necessarily bad games in themselves. A lot of these are just really, really terrible ports. We're going to start this video with a game that's just released just last week, and that is Endless Ocean. This was a game that I was very excited for at the last Nintendo Direct, but also incredibly worried about, because I feel like whenever Nintendo announce a brand new game and then say that it's going to be released in just a few months, they tend to not be Nintendo's best work. And I think this sadly falls into that category. I think the best way to describe this game is it's basically a underwater version of Fashion Dreamer, in that it does one thing really, really well, but it's also pretty overpriced for the fact that it does only do one thing. Endless Ocean is effectively just a game that sees you explore the depths of the ocean. And not only do you get to swim around with all the fishes, you also get to catalogue them and learn about them as well. Now, despite its faults, there is a few things that Endless Ocean does really, really well, and I think for me the biggest one is the way it depicts the fishes. Because all you need to do is swim up to them, hold down the L button to catalogue them, and then it does this beautiful zoom in where you get to see the fish in all its beauty. And if that's not enough for you, there's also a camera mode as well. Now, by far the best part of Endless Ocean is the online function. The fact that you can go and swim around with up to 29 other people all at the same time. And not only do you get to swim around with these people, they can also drop markers to tell you where the rare fish are or where there's good loot that you can go and collect as well. And this is the mode I spent about 99% of my time playing the game in. It's a great way to rack up XP. I could swim around in that part of the ocean for forever. It's actually a pretty large map as well. And one thing I wasn't expecting was the game kind of throws in a few like event moments or a few challenges for you to go and do with everyone who you're swimming around with as well, which I think is a really nice addition. The other thing I love about this is it's genuinely such a tranquil experience, which is not something I'm used to for underwater segments in games. But the reason why this is so chill is that you have no health and no oxygen bar. You are simply just swimming around, cataloguing the fish and exploring, and that's it. So those are the good parts. Let's get on to why I don't think Endless Ocean is going to be scoring particularly high. For a game where all you do is swim around the ocean and catalogue different fish, this is lacking one huge feature that just didn't make me feel very immersed in all of it. And that's the fact that you can't actually interact with the fish. This seems like such a small detail, but for me, it just kind of sort of ruined the experience, because when you swim up close to a fish, instead of the fish interacting with you and swimming around, or you being able to go through a shoal of fish, they simply just vanish from your viewpoint. And that took away a ton of the fun, because although I love the fact that fish don't attack you, I'd love it if they'd interact or even acknowledge your presence in some sort of way, but none of them really do. Now, Endless Ocean Luminos does have a story mode. The issue is, I can't stand it. I really, truly cannot stand the mode whatsoever. It winds me up so much. So they decided with this game to include voice acting. However, it's through an AI robot. So they have gone with the stereotypical AI voice as well. And this is a voice that will take you through the entire game's story. Now, there are other characters in the story that you'll come across, but all of those don't have any voice acting. And the issue with the story is that it's done in these tiny little chapter segments where the AI voice will be talking far too much and you'll be doing far too little. And I found myself getting bored so quickly. As you can see, I'm not very far through the story either. I just don't care for it. If I'm going to pick this game up, it'll probably only be in half-an-hour bursts. And if I'm going to play it, I'm either going to play it by myself just exploring, or in my favorite mode, which is the online mode. The final thing to consider is the fact that this game is a whopping £40. And if you remember when I talked about Fashion Dreamer and how I ripped into that, my biggest complaint was the price tag, considering it just does one thing pretty well. And again, that's going to be my biggest complaint for this. This is a fun game. If you enjoy exploring under the ocean, you'll have fun. This just isn't £40 worth. It just, and this is going to be the theme of today's rankings, feels rushed. And that is such a shame because this has so much potential. So I think I'm going to put it in... It's between B and C tier. I'm not sure if C tier is too harsh though. We're going to go C tier. No, we're going to go B tier for now. We might move it down with other games coming into it, but just an incredibly mid experience. Next, let's talk Snufkin Melodies of Moomin Valley. Despite the fact that I've never watched Snufkin before in my life, I actually found this to be a really enjoyable little game. I think my main criticism was it's just a little bit too short. But in a time where every cozy game is starting to meld into one cozy experience that seems to be identical to one another, this to me really stood out in a number of different ways. First of all, you just have the wonderfully beautiful art style. This game is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm so happy it runs so well on the Nintendo Switch. It's also a game chock full of character, not just in the dialogue, but also in the music and the way you use that to combat the puzzles as well. As this is a musical, story-rich adventure that sees you make your way around all of Moomin Valley, trying to restore the peace by getting rid of all these parks that the police officers set up. But that's not all, as the locals will also ask you to do things for them as well, and this will see you do anything from puzzles, stealth, and even little musical elements too. This is just best described as being a wonderful experience, and although it's one that's not particularly hard, it's one I enjoyed from start to finish. And I think if you're someone who likes to be able to sit down and complete games in a relatively short amount of time, you're going to absolutely adore this. So I think just because of the price to play time, I'm going to put it in the B tier, but it is a game I'd recommend to a lot of people. I had a blast playing it. Then we have a few games we talked about in my last video, so we won't spend too long on it. I think Another Code Recollection is going to go in B tier. It's a game I very much enjoyed, but also a game I don't think is for everyone. I think the big issue with these Another Code games is the fact that they are very clearly just a remaster, and because of that, they've kind of fallen into some old-fashioned traps that just make the game feel a little bit dated for what it could have been. Like a big example is how the cutscenes work and how it gets you to basically walk 10 meters between cutscenes. But if you don't know, Another Code Recollection is a really fun narrative puzzle experience, and this sees you play as a young girl who's trying to reconnect with her dad after believing that he has been long dead. Now, I will give some credit to the Another Code games. The story was actually surprisingly good. Considering this involves young teenagers and a ghost, I was expecting this to be something that was very shallow and very surface level, but in actuality, this turned out to be a really decent story and something I struggled to put down after a while. Your enjoyment in these two games is very much dependent on whether you can put up with the sometimes very bad pacing and some of the puzzles not really translating to the Switch all that well. A lot of them were designed for either using motion controls, which the Switch for some reason hasn't really used, or using the touchscreen, which obviously you can't use when you're docked on the Switch. So it's definitely by no means a perfect game, but I do really love the fact that this is fully voice acted, got some beautiful cutscenes, and again, is a cozy game that isn't just the same old thing. Another game we spoke about recently is going to be Outer Wilds, and this is going in the A tier. This to me has to be one of the best Nintendo Switch indie games I've played in 2024 by far, and the only reason it is not going in S tier, because the game itself is S tier worthy, is the fact that the port lets it down just a little bit. This is a difficult game to tell people to play because there is no words that will give justice to just how good of an experience this is. Because this isn't just like a decent story. The way in which you explore and find the story is also what makes this so special. Outer Wilds is an open world, or rather open solar system narrative experience that sees you play as a brand new space cadet who is off on a mission to explore. But it's not long before some strange goings-on happen and you find yourself stuck in a time loop. And it's up to you to tackle this time loop by exploring as much as you can to try and figure out the mystery of why you are stuck in this time loop. But the part that really made this game difficult to put down wasn't just the piecing together pieces of the story, but it's also the importance of time. Because each of the different planets, moons, and asteroids you can go to all change as time goes on. And it's not long before you start figuring out how to actually use this time loop to your benefit. The way this game's designed is just so genius. There's no order in which you need to go to different places. There's no limit to where you can go to at the beginning of the game, which means that you get to explore the story and find these different puzzle pieces in your unique way. And this is kind of similar to when I watched Interstellar for the first time. There's going to be long periods of time where you have no idea what's going on, but you just kind of enjoy the experience. And then there's this moment where everything starts to fall into place and you start to understand what's going on. And that right there is a just truly fantastic moment in gaming, and a moment I don't think I will ever forget. Now, this also comes with DLC, which I honestly don't think I've gotten to yet. The way this whole game is set up means there's a chance I have seen some DLC elements and have no idea that they're DLC, but I think that's also apparently meant to be well worth the money. But honestly, if you're after just an all-encompassing experience that is unlike anything you've played before, definitely give this a go. Just bear in mind the Nintendo Switch is by no means the best way to experience this. There was a patch recently that's made this a little bit better, but just know some of the textures are a bit off, some of the graphics are a bit weird in some places, and there are some frame drops when things start to load in as well. But if you don't mind dealing with that, I think it's a fantastic game to pick up. Let's get on to some games that just missed the mark for me. I think one I will definitely put in the D tier is Lake. Now, this is by no means a bad game. In fact, I think this might be an award-winning indie game, just not on the Nintendo Switch, or at least not for now. There is a chance they're going to come back and patch this. But what you're seeing right now is how Lake looks on the Nintendo Switch, and as you can see, this is by no means good. I love the whole concept of Lake, where you play a literal life sim of a woman who has moved to her hometown to help deliver parcels while she decides what she's actually going to do with her life now. And I love the fact that the life sim encompasses not only her work, where you get to drive around and deliver parcels yourself, but also what she decides to do after work, who she hangs out with, and where she goes. As I said, this is just let down by the fact the Nintendo Switch port is one of the worst ports I've seen recently. I truly hope they come around and they try and fix this, but I just don't think it should have been released in this state whatsoever. Speaking of bad ports, we also have Garden Life, which I'm going to put in the C tier because it's definitely not as bad as Lake is. If you're someone looking for basically a gardening sim with a really cute little story to go alongside of it, then Garden Life might be the game for you, as it is really cute for what it is and can teach you a lot actually about how to garden and keep plants alive and what to do for them. However, personally, I'm not really a fan of how this looks and plays on the Switch. This really is a beautiful game on PC. It's just a shame that the port doesn't really reflect that. I know some people have said in my comments that they're perfectly fine with how it looks, which is totally good with me, but considering this game is basically about the plants and making your garden look beautiful, it's really sad that you can't get that beauty across on the Switch. Going from some of the worst to some of the best, let's talk about a game I'm kind of ashamed to say I only just started playing a few weeks ago, and that is Hades. Because honestly, I saw all the hype about Hades 2, and I really wanted to get in on it, so I decided it was time to start playing Hades first, get that over and done with, and then I could join in the Hades 2 hype. Now, when I first saw Hades gameplay, I genuinely did not think this was going to be the game for me. I'm typically not a big lover of roguelikes. I really enjoyed Cult of the Lamb, but admittedly that was because I loved the cult part more than I loved the actual fighting part of the game, and just kind of put up with the fighting to enjoy the cult part. So I thought a pure game where all you do is run around and do the fighting part was just not going to be my thing. But I think the thing that made Hades really genius in how it does a roguelike is the fact that the more you play the game, the easier the game gets. But it's not just the fighting that I fell in love with, it's everything else that you do as well. Because in this dungeon crawler, you play as the immortal prince of the underworld, Hades' son, as he tries his best to try and escape the depths. But don't worry, this is not a battle that you have to do alone, because you're being helped by most of the Greek gods as well. And the part that really took me by surprise was the friendship and romance mechanics that went alongside each of the runs you do. Now, in roguelikes, every single run you do is basically randomized. And in Hades, this means that you'll come across different Greek gods each of your runs, and each of them will bestow upon you a power or a buff to help make that run slightly easier. And the more times you encounter them and give them presents, this will also increase your friendship with them. And the friendship that you have with some gods will actually affect your friendship with other gods as well, which I thought was a really cool thing to add. But the thing that's made me hooked on this game is each run you do, you collect different resources, and then when you die, which will happen an awful lot, you can then go and spend these resources on permanent upgrades that should hopefully mean that you can go further in the dungeons next time, collect even more resources, and get bigger and stronger each time. This is genuinely a game that I never thought would be for me, but then again, none of my favorite games were games I thought I'd fall in love with. So I'm really glad I gave this a try, and genuinely, this is going in the S tier. And although I'm nowhere near finishing this, so I will not be buying Hades 2 anytime soon, I now understand why there is so much hype about it. Next up is a game that I thought deserved a re-ranking after my 2023 list, and that is My Time at Sandrock. Now, when this game first came out, I was a big criticizer of it, asking why it was released in its current state, when it was not only pretty buggy, didn't look great, but was also largely unfinished. However, when I give games a bad review, I'm always open to changing it if they update the game. And My Time at Sandrock have done some pretty substantial updates that means I think it's time to re-rank it. So here you can see the footage of how the game looked when I gave it its original bad review, and here you should be able to see the footage of how the game looks now. But not only does the game look better and play better, it also now has all of the missing content that PC players could already access. So it is now officially a finished game. Although I do think they are bringing more DLCs to the game as we speak, but it is still a finished experience now. You can do everything. This is truly a fantastic experience, and if you're someone who's pretty burnt out from farming sims, which I think a lot of us currently are, this may be a fantastic game to take on, as this does have aspects of farming, but it is largely just a massive life sim. I can't get over how many characters have full character arcs and full voice acting, alongside a 60+ hour story for the game as well. That is a lot of fun to play. Honestly, this has gone from a game that I was like a bit meh about recommending to an experience which I think a lot of you are going to enjoy, and I'm glad I can now recommend the game. It's a life sim with a lot of character and a lot of characters. So yeah, I'm really glad that they did a better job, and I'm actually going to put it now in the A tier. Next, I want to talk about a game that I have never been so wrong about in my entire life. Now, I saw people talk about Batro. I even saw the thumbnail for the game Batro and just decided, I don't even know why, that this was probably not a game for me. I think it's because I heard that it was a roguelike. But just last week, I went and looked on the charts on the eShop and saw how high Batro was, and finally decided to just see what all the hype was about, and I downloaded it. And I've learned a valuable lesson about learning how to read about a game before I judge it. Because yes, this is a roguelike, but it is not a dungeon crawler. This is a poker roguelike. And this is essentially just a deck building game where you try and play different poker hands. And where the roguelike aspects come in is each time you've won a different game, you get given some money, and then you can spend this in a shop to try and build up your deck to be bigger and better. And each run you do, there'll be different things in the shop, meaning you can build up a different style of deck and have different strengths. Now, one word of warning, if you're someone like me who doesn't know a huge amount about poker, it might be worth having a little sheet of all the poker hands and what they mean up on them, because I'm pretty sure there's no way or no explanation in the game as to what each hand is, although in the bottom corner it does tell you which hand you're holding at that moment and what that will score you. But this is such a fun, almost puzzle-like game. Each sort of battle you take on, there's a certain amount of points you need to score in order to progress, and you need to score these points within a set amount of hands. Now, it's not purely luck, as you can also discard different cards as you go along, like you get given 3 or 4 separate times where you can discard a full hand of cards. But the puzzle side of things really comes in how you decide to build up your deck, as you'll be able to have up to 2 Joker cards that have special effects. You'll also have tarot cards which you can play that will also build up and level up your deck in different ways, alongside planet cards as well. And although this game sounds simple or sounds like there's not a lot to it, I can't put it down. I am genuinely, thoroughly obsessed with it. It is such a cool little game, especially for this price. And I feel like it's one of those games, kind of like the watermelon game, where like it doesn't look like a lot, but when you start playing it and start understanding it and start getting better at it, you become fully obsessed. And I'm pretty sure there's quite a lot of people in my comment section who have been saying how obsessed they've been with it as well. So genuinely, if you're looking for like kind of like a puzzle game fix, you might enjoy this. And for that reason, I'm going to put it in the A tier. Genuinely, thoroughly enjoying it. Another game I've really been enjoying is Little Kitty Big City. Now, I do want to answer the biggest question a lot of you have about whether the cat can die or whether the cat can get hurt. And the answer is no to both. There is genuinely no way in this game whatsoever you can hurt the cat or the cat will die. This is what a lot of us thought Stray was, and then we were kind of, you know, sent through all that trauma while playing Stray. But this is really just Untitled Goose Game sort of vibes, but as a cat in a city. The very start of the game shows you this little guy who falls out of his apartment into the big city, and it becomes his goal to try and make it back home. He's a sheltered indoor cat and has never experienced the outside world in this way before, so he's obviously gonna struggle just a little bit. And of course, being an intrepid explorer, you're also gonna get distracted by many a quest on the way as well. Now, this is a cozy game stacked with so much character. Not just in the dialogue, but also the ways you can interact with objects as a cat, where you're literally given the ability to swipe your paws so you can knock objects off of ledges, which I absolutely love. You also have a dedicated meow button, which is just a genius use of space. And then as you progress as well, you get not only different hats you can wear, a camera mode so you can take pictures of yourself in different hats, but also the ability to emote as a cat, which I think is utterly fantastic. Now, the puzzles themselves are a lot more straightforward, at least so far, than I found Untitled Goose Game. There's only really been a few moments where I did properly struggle, and that was mostly because of my own incompetence, and less so because the puzzles were difficult. But the fact that you can run around, mess with humans, do all these fun different quests for different animals as well, and overall just interact and explore with the world has made this such a fun little game. The main downside about Little Kitty Big City is probably the length of the game and how repetitive it gets towards the end for the price. I think it's going to be up to you whether you think a 3-hour game is worth the £22 price tag or whether you're going to wait for a sale. It's also available on Game Pass, which is probably the best way to experience the game. It does look pretty good on the Nintendo Switch. Obviously, if I show you the PC gameplay, you can kind of see the big difference between them. But when we've had so many bad ports on the Switch, I was pleasantly surprised by this one. It did have a few frame drops every now and again, but other than that, held pretty good. So yeah, a game I really enjoyed. It was a game I needed in my life, but most definitely not worth the money for everyone. So for that reason, I think I'm gonna put it in the A tier. It's kind of halfway between A and B because I definitely feel like it was better or something I enjoyed a little bit more than like Endless Ocean, but also not quite as good as the likes of Outer Wilds. Hello, it's Editing Eeowna from the future, here to change the ranking from an A to a B. I slept on it, I thought about it a little bit more, and it is really a hard game to justify for this full price tag. And I also did experience a few glitches in my playthrough as well, so just some things to bear in mind. But I really do love cats. Next, we're going to talk about Princess Peach. I spent a long time talking about how I was disappointed about this game in my last video, so I'm going to put it in the C tier. Honestly, it's a game I really enjoyed, just not a game that is worth that price tag. And I hate to say it, but I think it fell victim to the pink tax. Nintendo have put a lot of love and a lot of time into many of their Mario franchises. You know, we have the likes of Mario Odyssey, we have Yoshi's Crafted World, and this just didn't have the polish of either of those, or even Toad's Treasure Toad Tracker. Toad's... Oh, I was way off. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. Even that had more polish than this game does. It just doesn't look as good. It doesn't play as good. There's noticeable frame drops in it all the time. That being said, the whole experience was a lot of fun. I love the idea of being on stage, playing different characters, all of which have different abilities in them as well. I love the aesthetic of it. It just is either massively overpriced or massively underpolished for a 9-hour game. Peach deserved the extra polish and the extra time. The game was a bit short, only being 9 hours long, and it could have been so much more. Sticky Business, I'm going to put in the B tier. For a £8 game, I've gotten a lot of hours of joy out of it. I just wish the controls were maybe a little bit better with the controller. They're not all that intuitive, although you can turn on touchscreen controls. But this is effectively just lets you be a sticker shop manager. The real fun in the game is making your very own stickers. There's not much of a story to go alongside of it. There's also not much rhyme or reason to any of the stickers that you make either, which I think a lot of people were a bit disappointed in. I think people would have wanted to see a mechanic where it kind of tells you, this is the sticker I want to make, and give you a prompt, rather than having to just make it and come up with everything yourself. Either way, for £8, I've made some very cursed stickers and had a blast with it. And I would recommend this game to a lot of people who want to play something while watching TV, or just for 5 or 10 minutes every now and again. Planet of Lana is also going to go in the B tier. I feel like if it was slightly cheaper, it'd go in the A tier. Again, the main thing that lets it down is just its length for the price, so maybe wait for this to be on sale. But this kind of gives me, if War of the Worlds was done by Studio Ghibli. That is kind of the whole aesthetic and the whole vibe of this game, as this is a cinematic puzzle adventure that sees you play as Lana, who used to live on a planet that was completely undisturbed, but it's now become something else entirely. As while you're out and about living your life, you get to see an entire alien army land on your planet. The thing I really enjoyed about this is the fact that this has a little bit of everything. There's puzzles that you can solve with your little companion. There's platforming. There's places where you'll need to be stealthy so you don't get spotted. And also some slight action sequences as well. So it truly does do just about everything, which is why I think this became a game that I sat down and played in an entire sitting, as it works out as being just over 4 hours long. This truly is beautiful and a wonderful experience. Despite the fact that there's no dialogue in it whatsoever, it does manage to tell a story well. And I also think this looks wonderful on the Switch, and I'm surprised it runs so well. So a great game for a lot of people. Not as cozy as you might think it looks from the start though. You know, there is some times you're definitely going to fail at stuff, but definitely worth checking out if you think it's your vibe. Bando Tail is a game I've talked about a lot, and that's going straight up in the A tier. I feel like it's so almost an S tier game, but just not quite there for me. I think some of the mechanics are a little bit awkward, which holds it back. But again, this is just a cozy game that's so different, and that's what made me fall in love with it. This is effectively an RPG with no combat, but instead of grinding for XP by fighting, you grind for XP while crafting, as this will see you play as a little Yordle who's tasked with trying to fix their mistake of breaking all of the portals. But the thing that makes Bando Tail special isn't the heaps and heaps of different skill trees you have to go through, but instead is how the story is delivered with the characters that you meet who have so much personality. Like, for example, there's a singular sock in Bando Tail that alone has more personality than an entire cozy game has with every single one of its characters. Because some cozy games have been massively lacking in the dialogue front recently. This also has great value for money. The story alone will take you like 60 plus hours. The biggest downsides to Bando Tail is the fact that not everything is explained very well, so you'll definitely find yourself looking up a wiki or two every now and again. And also the fact that sometimes the grind is a little too RPG-like. Like sometimes you just be out there grinding for a couple of hours, especially if you've made a mistake and spent some of your XP on the wrong thing in the skill tree, then the game can feel like a bit of a slog. But to me, this is truly how cozy games should be in 2024. This is a cozy game with cozy mechanics, but also a whole lot of substance behind it, and that's what made it stand out. Another cozy game with a lot of substance behind it is Botany Manor. However, I'm going to be putting it in the B tier, I think. And again, that's just because it's a pretty expensive game for what is 3 to 4 hours of gameplay. But one thing I really like about this is it's a puzzle game with a really good story behind it. Again, a cozy game with some substance. And the way in which Botany Manor does the puzzles is just so unique, because it tasks you to go around and find different clues to figure out the perfect conditions for a plant to thrive in, and then find where you can put this plant in order for it to blossom. But alongside these puzzles is the fact that you get to explore this beautiful 19th century manor, where you also come across different items that tell the story of Alabella Green, a woman with so much passion for her work who had to fight against the sexism of trying to be a woman in science in the 19th century. This ran incredibly well on the Switch, and I love the fact that not all the puzzles were easy. Like, I got properly stuck a few times. The only big downside to this game is that some of the puzzles have a lot of clues that go alongside of them, and you have no real good way to track the clues. So I found myself backtracking a lot, which did get a little bit frustrating. But yeah, my main criticism is just, I wish that it was longer, or I wish that it was slightly cheaper. Another game going into the B tier is Stitch, with a full stop after it, because that part has been throwing a lot of people. And this is going in B tier because it does one thing really, really well. And that is a kind of like Sudoku-like puzzle game, but with a bit of a difference as it's centered around embroidery. This will see you take on different embroidery tasks of different sizes. And do note, this is also a mobile game as well, and I think this is best played with the touchscreen on the Switch. And basically the goal is pretty simple. You need to fill in all of the areas with absolutely no gaps. And the numbers tell you how many squares need to be filled in. But much like Sudoku, there is a number of different answers you can put down, but only really one right solution. So you may find yourself having to backtrack and change a few things in order to get the pattern right. And like all good puzzle games, you can start off pretty simple and pretty small and work up to some much more challenging puzzles as well. This also has a similar idea to A Little to the Left, that even when you've finished all of the puzzles, with some of them being absolutely massive and are being called marathon puzzles, they also have weekly challenges and hoops as well for you to take on, so the game's never really over. It's such a simple concept, but executed so well, and originally I thought the price was a little bit steep, but when you see just how many different puzzles there are, on top of the weekly puzzles that you get as well, I started to realize that actually this was a pretty long-lasting game. So if you're someone looking to do embroidery vibes without the mess or without the poking yourself with a needle repeatedly, or at least that's how I found embroidery, then this may be the game for you. Now we're going to be finishing off with a bit of a cheeky game, and that is because it's not on the Switch yet, but it's also the game I've been spending the most amount of time playing. It's something I'm obsessed with, and I just wanted to talk about it a little bit before I make an entire video about it, which should be coming next week. Now this is a sentence I don't get to say often, but this is a farming sim truly unlike anything I have ever played before. And I think testimony to the fact that it is so unique is the fact that every single time I've played this, not a single person has gone, this is just a rip-off of Stardew Valley. Because not only is the art style truly unlike Stardew Valley, the gameplay is so ridiculously unique. And then you have the fact that this game costs less than £17, which is absolutely wild. Echoes of Plum Grove starts off with you moving to a brand new city named Honeywood. But this is also set in the 1700s. Now this does have a lot of your typical farming sim stuff, because you have relationship mechanics, you also have farming. There's even a bundle system as well. But there's a few big things that set this apart. Because first of all, there's quite a lot of death in this game. Even more death if you decide to murder people. But essentially, because this is set in the 1700s, that means that at any point a disease can come and take you and half the town with it. But the really cool thing about this is because there's a chance to die, there's also a way to carry on the game. And that's the fact that if you have children in Echoes of Plum Grove and you die, you get to play as your children. So this becomes a generational farming sim. And I've heard stories where some people who have been playing this game have had a funeral every single day of the month after a disease has come and taken the whole town. So this is essentially a farming sim where you only really farm in order to get things so you can trade for better items or money from other people. And it's more so like a relationship sim where it focuses around you doing quests for other villagers, but also, you know, making friends, having a family, adopting kids or having kids of your own. And then you also have the other side of this game, which I don't want to spoil because honestly, it's an experience. But it's safe to say this is a game where you can kind of make your own story. You could play this game as a pacifist and just kind of watch whatever happens in the town, or you can kind of be proactive in the villages you like and don't like in that respect as well. It's hard to put into words how much I love this game, but I just love that it's kind of got the sandboxy feel. You can just do whatever you want. You can make your own story, you can live your own life, and just enjoy the chaos, because that's essentially what it is. That is every single game I've played in 2024 ranked so far. Let me know if there's any games in the comments down below that I need to check out that I've somehow missed. And if money is tight right now and you want to see some of the best free games on the Nintendo Switch, click this video here.